Hello, and welcome to codeLive. Today, we are going to build an API using code, specifically Node.js, and a framework that I like very much, which is Fastify. And we will build an API that supports the OpenAPI specification, and then we will integrate this API with Salesforce. My name is Julian Duque. I am a principal developer advocate here at Salesforce, and welcome you all to codeLive. Please go ahead, type in the chat, say hi, and tell us where are you watching us live today. For example, I'm here right now in Tampa, Florida, in the United States. But tell us where are you connecting from, and if you have any question, please feel free. I will be monitoring the chat during the stream. If you see me looking at this side of the stream, it's because I am watching you in the chat. Okay, let's get this started. Before we jump into the topic, remember there is a forward-looking statement here. Salesforce is a public traded company. Please don't make any financial decisions on things that are not generally available. And why I'm telling you this? Because I am planning to show you something that it's currently in beta and it is not GA, so it's better to have this safe harbor. Okay, let me share my screen. And remember, we have the Salesforce Developers portal where you can find all of our recent blog posts, videos, podcasts, events, and all of the developer documentation. For example, you can take a look at a recent video that we created explaining all about Einstein GPT. You have heard about GPT here and there, and we are super excited to have been working on this Einstein GPT tool, learning also about Data Cloud, and we will have an upcoming codeLive. I will be telling you about it later. That will cover Data Cloud as well. And in regards of the different series we have been creating, Alba Rivas and our developer advocate team are working on a DevOps Essentials series. You can start watching the videos right now. They are on our YouTube channel, DevOps Essentials. It will be, I think, a 7-8 video series. Take a look so you can learn everything about DevOps. And today's topic, it's pretty much based on this blog post that we published a couple days ago, which is design a Swagger API with code to bring data into Salesforce. If you are more into reading, go ahead, take a look at this blog post. It will cover pretty much what we are going to be seeing today. But I want to show you some other different things around OpenAPI specification. External services is something that we have been covering during this year in codeLive. That will help you to bring data and to have better integrations with third-party services into Salesforce. Remember our Salesforce Developers YouTube channel. We have some upcoming live streams. Next week, we will have Mohit that is going to tell us everything about secure Apex using user mode database operations. Aditya is going to join me later this month to talk about Data Cloud. So we will learn how to load data programmatically using the ingestion API. Also, at the end of the month, there will be an AMA with Danielle. She will be interviewing a couple of executives and VPs around the Data Cloud product, and it will be super interesting. So go ahead, um, mark this event as something that you should attend and come up with all of your questions. And next month, we will have also an AMA about Einstein GPT and all of the tooling that our developer tools team are working to integrate this AI experience into our developer tools, specifically Visual Studio and Code Builder. Okay, taking a look at the chat, we see folks Leo and Bella from Albania. We have Hector from Chile. Hola, Hector. Tech lead, of course, always joining us from Mumbai, India. We have Eric from Paris, Rahul from Pune, India as well. Wonderful. Thank you very much for joining me on this Code Live. So, what are we going to be talking today is about the Open API specification. You might have heard about this term Swagger. Swagger was the name of this API specification back in 2016. Basically, there is a standard that let us describe an API using either JSON or YAML, and we will be able to have access to developer tools that can auto-generate code based on these API descriptions. Imagine, or if you already work with SOAP back in the day with the WSDL, like the WSDLs, where you had the description of the whole web service, and you will be able to generate the client for Java or for .NET or for different programming languages. The same happened with Swagger, but this is mostly for RESTful APIs. After 2016, the OpenAPI initiative was created now as a standardization body that took over this specification, and then they released the version 3. So the main difference is that the version 2, it was called Swagger, and the version 3 is known as the OpenAPI specification. So the OpenAPI initiative, which is the organization that manages this standard, has a lot of different members. One of those members is Salesforce. We are part of the Open API initiative because we believe in this project and we use it in our products, both on external services, and also we have something that I will show you later, which is a way to describe our APIs also with Open API specification. And in the Swagger website, you will be able to have access to the whole documentation of this specification. As of today, the latest version is the 3.1. Normally, we have been working with the 3.0 is the version we support. And the 2.0 is the previous one, the Swagger. So today we are going to be working with 3.0, which is the modern version of the OpenAPI specification. If you want to learn more about how this works, go ahead, click on the documentation, read the standard. I love reading this type of documents because I can learn a lot. But basically, referring to the blog post I wrote, the OpenAPI specification, or this document, is composed by different sections. We have an info section, which is the metadata that describes the API. We have the server section, which let us know the different endpoints of our API, if we have either a production, a staging, or QA. The security section will let us know what types of authorization and authentication mechanisms we can use for our API. Path describe all of the different endpoints that we can use to interact with our API, and the methods, if it is a get, if it is a post, if it is a delete, and how are those request and response objects that these paths support. Tags, useful for documentation. External docs, a section that I can link to describe where are these documentation located for people that want to learn more about the API. And components. And components is one of the important ones because it describes the schema, the shape of the objects that my APIs is composed by. Okay. This is an overview of the OpenAPI specification. We will start learning how to create this using code. You can do it by hand. I mean, nothing is going to stop you to describe an API by writing JSON or YAML if you already know the shape of the objects, if you already know the URL paths of if the API you are using doesn't support the OpenAPI specification. But if you are designing or building an API from scratch by using code, let's say Java or JavaScript with Node.js or Python, there are certain specific frameworks for each programming language that will allow you to, from the framework, describe the API using these Swagger technologies. If you are a Java developer, Spring, this framework to create web applications, have great support for Swagger. So if you are a Java developer, go ahead and take a look at the Spring documentation and see how can you describe this API by using annotations. You might know that I am a Node.js developer, so I love writing APIs and server-side code using Node.js, and today we are going to be doing so with Node. The framework we will using it's called Fastify. I have used this framework before, but now I will show you how to create the project from scratch, like installing the Fastify CLI, installing the different dependencies, and adding support to these specific plugins that we will use. We will use two plugins with Fastify. One is called Fastify Swagger, which is the one that allows me to auto-generate this specification file from code, and the other one is called Swagger UI. Swagger UI is the one that will give me that uh, look and feel, or that website that it's going to be more user friendly. To give you an example of the final result of what we are going to have today, this is the API already implemented. It's called Books API. You might know this API because I've used it before for our external services chapter and for my blog post. This is Swagger UI. Here you can see the different endpoints that my application support, like get and post, the components or the schemas. I have a book and what is the shape of that book, and I have an error and what is the shape of that error. But this is the documentation side. The OpenAPI specification file, it is a JSON that looks like this. So we have the info section, the component section, and the paths section. Since my application it's public, it doesn't have security, we are not covering that security aspect here. Available as open source, you also have the Swagger editor. This is part of the Swagger project, and you can write Swagger files in this website. This is the same API, but using YAML. As you can see, is a little bit more simple than JSON, and you can get the result here. Pretty much, you can see how the documentation side will look like if you are just writing this description without using a code generator. As we saw from our three previous episodes with Jeff Douglas, that we did this refactor of the Salesforce API with MuleSoft, MuleSoft also supports the OpenAPI specification. With any point, you can also describe an API using OpenAPI specification and perform the implementation with MuleSoft as well. Or MuleSoft also has support to this language, which is RAML, and serves the same purpose. But today we will cover to this OpenAPI specification, which is a standard that it's more widely available and very supported in the open source community. Okay, fantastic. If you have any question, please let me know. Go ahead in the chat, ask, because I will be more than happy to answer. Let's go to the code because that's what we are doing. So we are going to be using Fastify. Fastify is this framework that lets me build web applications with Node.js. If you are a Node.js developer, you might heard about Express or Sales.js or these type of frameworks. Well, Express has been the de facto standard framework for Node, but recently Fastify has been taking over Express. Why? It is way more performant. It's maintained by Node.js core developers, so they know the internals of Node, so they can optimize how this framework performs in production environments. And the ecosystem, which are all of these different plugins that are maintained by the community and by the Fastify team, are growing immensely. So you have access to a lot of different plugins for authentication, for database access. And today we will use the database access one, which will help us to connect to a PostgreSQL database, and we will use the Swagger ones. It also has a tool, which is the Fastify CLI. The Fastify CLI is useful to generate Fastify projects. I already installed that Fastify CLI. So if you are following along, make sure that you have Node.js installed in your computers. I'm using Volta to install Node.js on my computer. This works both for Linux, Mac, and Windows. So take a look at Volta, very good for manage and Node.js versions. I installed the latest production ready version of Node, the LTS version, which is 18. And I already installed Fastify CLI. How to install Fastify CLI? By using npm install, do it global. So it installed the command on my computer, and the name of the project is called Fastify CLI. I'm not going to execute this program because it will try to fetch Fastify CLI from the internet, and we don't need to do that now. But we can check that it's installed by running Fastify help. So now we have the Fastify CLI installed, and it is showing us different commands that we can run. Here we have the generate. So generate, let us create a new project. So since we don't have a Fastify project, we will need to create a new one. So let's go ahead and create a Fastify project. Fastify generate, let's call it books API, codeLive. And this argument that I'm passing at the end, the ESM, means that I want this project to use ECMAScript modules. By default, it will create the project using CommonJS, which is the default way of managing modules in Node. I would like to use this for all of those LWC developers. You are more used to this way of importing modules. So we are not going to confuse you here. The idea is to be pretty much using the same way to import and export modules with Node. And let's use ECMAScript modules for that. So let's create the project. It will create a folder. So now we go ahead and go to that folder. And it is telling us, okay, run npm install to install the dependencies. And you can start the application with npm start, or to start developing this application, use npm run dev. So I'm going to be following the instructions. Run npm install. It will fetch the dependencies we need from internet. And after that, we will be opening Visual Studio Code to start working on our project. Tech lead, since we have these frameworks, in which scenario do we need a middleware like MuleSoft? So a middleware like MuleSoft is, you already have an API, for example, the API is already implemented, or you are going to deploy this API, let's say to Heroku or AWS or anywhere else, and MuleSoft will be able to perform that integration, that gateway in between this API and your Salesforce implementation, or maybe any other application. Remember that with MuleSoft, you can have like way more complex workflows. And in the example we did with Jeff, we brought data from multiple APIs and created one API based of those. So in that case, MuleSoft is going to be a very good use case. Or if you are not going to write code, you can follow something similar like Jeff did, for example. Okay, we installed the dependencies. Let's open Visual Studio Code so we can start building our project. And let's run our project with npm run dev. And this will open a web server on the port 3000. And that's it. Right now, it only replies root equals true. That's the only thing that this web application is doing. Let's take a look at the code to understand a little bit what's happening and then start implementing our API. First, we have the app.js file. The app.js file is going to be the main file for Fastify. Since we are using the CLI, this has a plugin which is the auto load. It will auto load different folders and files that you have in your project. So think of this as something that is more automated. And I like this way to bootstrap an API pretty fast without writing all of this code from scratch. Here in this main function is where we are going to start writing our custom code. The custom code here will be similar to this one. We are going to be registering the plugins. So we will install a dependency and register that plugin here that will add support to our project for using Swagger, Swagger UI, and PostgreSQL. And you don't need to worry about this. Pretty much what this is doing is auto-loading the plugins and auto-loading the routes. What are routes? And routes is what we are interested in. Routes are paths, are pretty much our API endpoints. If we open the routes folder, we can see two things. One is the root.js, and the other one is the example. So the root.js is specifying a get route, which is the slash, the root, and it is returning root equals true. So basically, this is the route. And we have another one, which is the example. Let's open the index.js. It is creating a root route within the example folder, and it is returning this is an example. So if I go and type slash example, I should get this is an example. This is how we write APIs with Fastify. We define the method, we define the output, and we gave it a route, pretty much a path. Okay. To make it simple, I'm going to be writing my two routes, get books and post books within the root file. I can create a folder and be a little bit more organized, but the purpose here is like understand how can I integrate this Swagger plugin. So let's use this specific file for doing so. But let's implement those two routes. We have a fastify.get slash books. So this will be a get books. And let's return a list of books. So we will return in a list of books. And right now I'm like auto-completing code using GitHub Copilot, using the power of AI and GPT to be able to generate this code. What are these two objects? Request is basically what I am receiving from the client, and reply is what I'm going to send. I am replying by default by returning data, but if I want to reply with a specific status code, for example, if it is an error, I will use this object to do so. And then use post, Fastify, post, books, and then write the same async function, request and reply, and let's return that we created a project and do a fastified log and get the body from the request. So see that we are printing out the body. The body here contains the object that I'm sending to this API, to this post. So let's define our API this way and let's see if this worked. So go ahead, our server. Let's go to the books route. We have the route returning those JSON objects. And if we send a post request, let me go to Postman, create a post request to the local host 3000 and send a body in JSON, ID 6. This needs to be JSON. And title, it will be mastering OpenAPI. Let's submit this request. It needs to be /books, obviously. It returns what I'm telling them to return. Pretty much remembering the code that I'm telling them to return the lost symbol. And in the logs, we can see that we received mastering OpenAPI. We received the body. So now with this, we will be able now to start like implementing our API, connecting to a database, etc. But we just bootstrapped an API. Now I can start adding Swagger support. Let's see how can we do this. So let me go ahead and stop the server. I'm going to start running some commands. Okay. Let me select my profile because I'm working with my personal profile and I will love to use the work profile, which looks better. Awesome. Now it looks like Salesforce code. Perfect. Okay. Now let's install the two dependencies that I will use, the Swagger one and the Swagger UI. How do I know that those dependencies exist? From the Fastify website, I can click on the ecosystem tab. And on the ecosystem tab, I have access to two lists. The core plugins. Core plugins means plugins that the Fastify team support. And community plugins means plugins that other folks from the open source community support. So in the core plugins, I see that there is support for Swagger. So we have a plugin for Swagger. And there are like other plugins that also validate Swagger, but this is the official plugin for Swagger. I can go ahead, click, and take a look at the documentation. And here it will tell me that it supports both the version 2 and the version 3 of Swagger. And this is how you work. If you want to implement the version 2, use the Swagger field. Or if you want to use the OpenAPI, you will need to use the OpenAPI field. Here is the example with the OpenAPI field. With this plugin, you can do two things: write the whole specification on a JSON or let Fastify auto-generate the code. We will want to let Fastify auto-generate the code. So let's install the plugins. Install Fastify Swagger, and we want to install also Fastify Swagger UI. So Swagger is the one that auto-generates the specification. Swagger UI is just that interface or that website that has the documentation. How can we load these plugins? So here you see that we have a place where we are going to add our custom code. So we will need to import those two plugins. So let's import the Swagger plugin from Fastify Swagger, and then import the Swagger UI from Fastify Swagger UI. But we have the two plugins. How to register those two plugins? So to register those two plugins, we need to use the register method in Fastify. So let's do fastify.register Swagger, and then we need to pass a configurations option. This configuration option is where I pass how I want to define or specify my specification. So first, I want this to be an open API specification, right? And the open API specification has one required field. The required field is the metadata, the info. And info has the title and a description and a version. Here I am registering the Swagger plugin, and I am telling, okay, this is an OpenAPI specification, and this is the metadata. So we have a books API from codeLive. This is an API to manage a bookstore, and the version is 1.0. It's the only thing that we are going to be doing right now. Okay, that's the only thing that we are going to be doing right now. If we launch this project, let me see if we have any error. Everything is working perfectly. And let's see if we can get the API docs JSON file. It doesn't get that file because the file is not hosted. We will need to use, in this case, the Fastify generate Swagger command. Fastify with an F, not with a G. And in this case, let me see how can we use this command. Let me pass the app.js file. And if I pass the app.js file, you can see that it generated the OpenAPI specification on a JSON for that project. So it detected the two paths, the get and the post, and the default response. I am returning just a text, something very simple. I am not specifying the type of data that I'm returning, but it generates that information for me. But I want to have these online. How to have this online, but registering the Fastify UI. So registering the Fastify UI plugin, and here I will need to pass a route. Where is this code, or where is this website going to be hosted? So I say, if I go to /API docs, I will see that documentation. And now, as you can see, I have access to that documentation. This is an API to manage a bookstore, but it doesn't explain pretty much my API. Why? I am not defining a schema. I am not defining the components. I don't know my routes, what type of data they receive and what type of data they return, and the different response objects. For example, currently we have just a 200 default response, but we might want to have like different responses. Let's say if the data is invalid, or if there is a server error, or if there is an authentication error, depending on the HTTP status code, I might want to have a specific response. So how can we start specifying these parameters? Let's go again to Fastify. So Fastify, if you go to the documentation, it has a feature that is missing on other Node.js frameworks. And this is something that I like a lot from Fastify, which is the schema support or the schema validation support. So Fastify has a full framework for validation and serialization that support JSON schema. And when I start writing these schemas or adding these schemas using Fastify, the OpenAPI specification will understand that these schemas are part of the API and will add them to the specification file automatically. So this is something that I'm going to be using to augment my routes. Okay, I have a question here from TechLeague. When to use JSON and when to use YAML? Is pretty much what language are you most comfortable with? When to use English and when to use Hindi, for example, depending of the context as well. If you are more comfortable writing YAML, or if your team decided that you are going to be writing the files in YAML, use YAML. If you are more comfortable with JSON, use JSON. Why we are using JSON here? JSON is a native language in the JavaScript ecosystem, and it has become like a also de facto standard for the web. JSON means JavaScript object notation, so it's natively supported by any JavaScript runtime. So this is why it's super fast and convenient to write JSON or return JSON in this situation. If I, for example, take this output, let's say the Fastify generate Swagger, this JSON response, let's get it here and copy it so I can send it to the Swagger editor. I have a Swagger editor open here. If I paste it, the Swagger editor will convert JSON to YAML. So this editor is going to be doing the task for me because this editor supports YAML in this case, but it does the transformation automatically. So it depends of what are you most comfortable with. Cool. Let's continue with our code. We have not finished. So what I want to do mostly with these projects is I have a folder, or I create a folder where I will be defining the schemas. So let's create a folder, schemas, and here let me create a file, index.js, and here is where I'm going to be specifying the shape of the objects. So I have two objects. Let's say a book is going to be a JavaScript object, and let's say the error is going to be a JavaScript object. Let's call this object a book schema, an error schema. Now I will need to start defining the shape of my object. So the book has a description. So the description, this represents a book. Also has a type. This is of type object. So it has properties. And what properties does it have? It has an ID. So the ID is of type string. And I can specify also formats. This is of format UUID. Julian, how do you know the types and the formats? On the documentation. I go to the documentation. Let me go to the specification. I find the components. Let me find the components object, the schemas. So I can take a look at the schema object, and the schema object has the different properties that the schema object has. And it can give me the different types it support. So let me take a look at this documentation, schema object. Where is the property? There is a property object. Let me find. Object, external, no, this is the external documentation. Components object. So this is component object is composed by a reference object. No, reference is just a reference. It is the schema. The schema object is. Oh, this is the data type. Sorry. I got the data types. This is going to be applicable to all of the different objects. So the data types that the specification supports are going to be integers, strings, booleans, and these are the different formats. So here I can specify a date or a binary, a byte. So this is how you can specify different types of objects in this situation. Cool. Okay, let me continue. My book has a title. The title is a string. It has an author. The author is also a string. And it has a publish date. It's also a string, but the format is a date time. So it knows that what it expects is a datetime format. And the error, my error, let me describe the error. This represents a error. For some reason, Copilot is not enabled, but don't worry. It is type object, and the properties of the error are going to be the code. This is going to be an integer, and the format of that integer is 32 bits. And the message, it's also another thing that I will be returning, will be a string. And I can also specify from this schema object the required fields. So I will pass an array and say, okay, my required fields when I'm creating a book are going to be the title and the author. And when I am creating an error object, I will need to specify both the code and the message. Tech lead. Our Postman API made by Philippe also made with this framework. No, the Postman APIs, we will show something later, they are created manually. Basically, you create a folder and you create a request, and then you save these, and this has like a specific format where it is stored. But I believe that you can import OpenAPI into Postman And there is support to import an OpenAPI specification into Postman. So you can pass both either YAML or JSON and get that API into Postman. And we can give it a try later. I like that. I haven't tried that. Okay, I have the two objects. Let's export them. So let's export the error schema. Let's export the book schema. And now in the routes, what I will do in the routes is import those schema objects and add them to my project. So let me go ahead and do an import of the book schema and error schema from the schemas index.js file. And then I can add them to Fastify. I can add them to my project. So Fastify, add a schema, and the schema has an ID, and I will expand the book schema object. What is this? I am expanding this object into the root of this object that I have here. This is an object spreading operator in JavaScript. So I'm adding those two schemas, and this other one is going to be the error, and I will expand the error. Good. So now I have those two schemas into my specification. Let me see how this looks like. If I go to the documentation, now I have the two schemas. So I should have a component section into my definition. And if you see, this is how we define them. If I go to my definition, I should have the component section. See? But what's going on here is that I am not using those objects or those schemas in my paths. So I will need to tie those together. How can I tell my routes that I'm going to be using those schemas? Okay, so the second argument of a route can have a schema function or a schema property. So here what I'm doing is, okay, so let me specify a schema for you. So the schema that I'm going to be passing is the following. So this is the description. This is to get all books. I can tag it if I want, and I can specify the responses. So here I have the successful response and the error response. So the error response, let me pass a description. This is returns an error. And what it returns, here I am referencing the error schema. So this reference means that it's going to look for an ID, which is error, into the schema database that we already have defined in the components, and we'll use that as the object that this route returns. And the same we are going to do with the 200. So we have the successful response. This is of type list or array. And the items that I will be returning is a reference of that book schema. So here I am specifying that when I am getting all the books, I am getting multiple items, and each item is of the type book that I specified before. If I update my documentation, now we can see the route. It has the two responses and it has the references. There is one issue here. This is doing something called def0, def1, is because for some reason the IDs that Fastify is automatically generated are using like an autonomeric or auto increment number. And this is going to be an issue. If we import this schema into Salesforce, we will have not a good implementation. So this is solved by having a ref resolver. This is something that the framework supports in the Swagger plugin. So I will specify the ref resolver. So this is how I'm going to be resolving the references. And let me build the local reference. And this has, okay, the JSON file, the base URE, the fragment, and the index. Now I'm going to be building this. I will return either the ID or that auto increment object. So in this case, I am building the reference with the ID. So I'm going to get either book or error. If I refresh, now I have book, error, and my reference are properly named. So when I import this into Salesforce as external service, the objects that it will auto generate are going to be named either book and error. And the same is going to be with the post. So we will specify the body, etc. I'm going to be uh, pretty much ignoring all of that because we are running out of time. And let me share this resource with you. This is the Books API project already implemented with the full source code on GitHub. So please go ahead and scan this QR code or go to my Julian Duque GitHub repository. Here, I'm going to be typing here. In the codeLive examples repository, you can click on external services, and there we have the Books API application. This is a full implementation with database, with all of the routes, and this is the one that I have deployed in Heroku. Why I am showing you this because I want to show you how to import pretty much this project into Salesforce. And let me show you. So I have the org. I need to create the name credential. So I already created that name credential for the Books API that uses that URL, and it has the external credential for that specific API. I already created the perm set. You can go ahead and take a look at the blog post to see how you do that. And then on external services, you can go on external services, add a new external service from an API specification. This is going to be book service codeLive. You get the name credential and you pass the relative URL of the specification. And it will validate that the schema is good. And from here, you can start importing the service and the different methods that you want into Salesforce. And see here, it will auto-generate certain Apex classes, and you will be able to use those classes on Flow, Apex, Einstein, bots, etc. We already discussed these external services in Apex and external services in Flow. Go ahead and take a look at those videos. But I just wanted to show you this. And last, it is something that I want to show you, and this is what I told you about the forward-looking statement, is the Salesforce APIs or the REST APIs can also generate an OpenAPI specification document. How can you do that? So go ahead to that URL that I am sharing there, or search for generating an OpenAPI 3.0 document. This is in beta. It is not GA yet. You will need to enable this feature. How to enable this feature? Go to your org. It only works on developer editions, Scratch org, sandboxes. So go to your org. On the user interface menu, so go to the user interface menu, open the user interface page, and here enable the Salesforce Platform REST API, OpenAPI specification generation. So you enable this and you follow the documentation. You can perform an API request to generate the specification for certain objects. So this is the route, the async specifications OIAS3. You specify the resources that you want to generate. If it is all of the resources or just for a specific, let's say you just want the account, the leave, and the contact. This is how you specify the different selectors of what you want to be generated. You submit the request, and then it will give you an URL. And when you get that URL, it will return the specification. Off camera, I already did that. So I requested the full OpenAPI specification to my org. It gave me this URL. I requested that specification, and I have a almost 19 megabyte file. It's huge, with my API specification for my org, with the paths, with all of the parameters, the response, the schemas, etc. You can copy this specification and paste it on the Swagger editor website. Be careful because this file is huge. So I'm trying to paste a 19 megabytes file into this browser. It will do the conversion. It will load the information, but this tab is going to crash in a moment. It has happened before because it has like multiple lines. It will try to generate the documentation. If you request like way less resources, of course you will have the documentation. But see, this is a properly created API. Now you have all of the different routes and the schemas, and even with the security enabled, so you can authorize from here. But I don't want to kill my browser. I will close this tab. As you can see, it killed that page. Run out of memory. I don't want to mess with this. Let's close it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Last, let's see how can we import this API that it's deployed into Heroku. How can we import it in Postman? So I have Postman file import. And it's an OpenAPI 3.0 with a Postman collection. And I'm passing the information. Let's import. And it's doing the import. It import the books API. And there we have the two routes. Get books and create a book. We just need to pass the variable to be able to do that request from here. But as you can see, the API specification can be used also to import APIs into Postman. So if I pass that specific URL here, I can request the books and I'm getting the books from my API. Fantastic. How can you learn more about external services? We have a great resource in Trailhead that will teach you about the external services and the OpenAPI specification and how can you import those into Salesforce and invoke them from Flow, from Apex, and you can also do it from Omni Studio, Einstein bots. Go ahead, play with these, learn about APIs. This is very important information for your different Salesforce projects. And I am more than happy to be here again with you all sharing this information. So thank you very much for joining me on this Code Live. Next week, remember, Mohit is going to be talking about security with the user mode database operations. And after that, I will be with Aditya talking about Data Cloud and the Ingestion API. Thank you for joining me and see you on the next one. Bye bye.